Adam, but we're going to be going back into the Rambam in a minute. Let's just see some of the ishtalshalis, the whole unfolding. We're right before Parakeh in the art scroll. It's 22. And we said, and we're going to go back to the Rambam in a second because I really want to see the whole unfolding of idol worship. So page 22, verse 25. So in Hebrew it reads like this: V'yeda adam oides ishtay v'teled ben v'tikra shmai sheis. And he called him Seth. Ki shas li elokim zera acher tachas hevel ki arogoi Cain. Because Cain killed Hevel, and God then gave him another son, which was Seth. Ula sheis gam hu yulad ben v'yikra shmai Enosh. Okay, we're going to get back in the Rambam in a few minutes, but Enosh we know was the first one that the generation of idol worship started to spin out of control. Who remembers how that began? What was their svara? What did they say? How did they justify the beginning of idol worship?
God created these other entities.
God created these other entities, and why would I worship them?
He wants us. God gives power, then we should give power.
Yeah, hit it. This is,
God placed, he said that God placed honor on them, so it should be, it's fine.
Beautiful. God gave them honor. Why should I not give them honor? And what's the honor that God gave them? Look at the sun. It's powerful. Look at the buffaloes. Say again, Tzaddik?
Like when these items, like placeholders, like the sun.
Yeah, these are powerful.
Yeah.
And therefore, if God gave these energies power, thank you very much, then certainly I should also honor them. And this is where all the problems begin. So let's see the Rambam. Okay, then we'll go back into the Torah a little bit. So says the Rambam. So remember what did we say yesterday started to happen? What was the next thing in the spinning out of control of idol worship? And by the way, my friends, very important, you should really learn the laws of idol worship from the Rambam, because there's so much basic understanding of how the world spun out of control, and really how to understand what's going on in the world today, and help the world, how do you call unspin out of control? Get back on course? To return, to come back, to do tshuva. Let's go, Rabotai. Fairness, he's going to share with all of us, Bezrat Hashem. I only had a little breakfast this morning. Okay, so then all of a sudden something happens. What happens? So days went on, and this is where things get really problematic. Says the Rambam, then came the false prophets. What was the problem with the false prophets? The Amru, Sheha'el tziva lahem, ve'amar lahem, ivdu koichav ploini. When the false prophets came, they added something. They were institutionalizing idol worship. And they were coming along and saying, I've received the message that this star told me to, or even God told me to worship the star, or God told me to worship the person, or God told me to worship this constellation. And they were coming in the name of God. They were saying that they were prophets.
What was like the goal of these false prophets?
You know, if you create a religion, like that's pretty good for business. You're a businessman, right? Not bad. Not a bad way to bring in the big bucks. Just make up a religion. Convince it, and specifically, if you could convince people that you spoke to God. Well, of course they have to invest in your business. It's only going up from here. Buy the dip.
You say making new religion, but wasn't the whole point that it was still part of Judaism?
This is before Judaism. This is we're 3 generations into the creation of heaven and earth. We're going to see where Judaism comes center stage here. But this is the world spinning out. We're still before the flood here.
What were they like deterring people from? What was like the general? There wasn't Judaism. It was the general.
There were tzaddikim. Remember, there was Adam, there was Seth. There were people that knew God. I think one of the powers that the Nevi'ah Sheker wanted was exactly that, power. It was control, it was manipulation. If you could be a false prophet, you would push people in certain directions. Just walk around the streets of Jerusalem, you meet a whole bunch of them every single day. The Lord has toldeth me. And they're all over the place here. You meet a couple just walking into yeshiva. And I say, you coming in the name of prophecy, bro? Because that's a problem, actually. If you say that you had every single human being can have a relationship with God, that's obvious. But to say that you received a direct message that's telling the world to do X, Y, and Z, and it's telling the world to uproot a mitzvah in the Torah, we'll see how that's going to be a big problem. Because once the Torah was given as a national revelation to 3 million human beings, so that's a national testimony of the event. So let's now enter the world of the false prophets. And they said, worship this star, or all these stars. V'ikrivu, and you should offer them sacrifices. And of course, we'll take a cut, because you have to pay your membership fees to come into the temple of Saturn. The Naschuloi, and they started offering libations. That's not cool. Ubonaloi heichal, and then they started making these temples, but it was more than just a sanctuary and a temple they were making. Va'asut surasai, they started making forms kedei lishtachavois law, that you could bow down to it. So, what would it look like to bow down to the form of Saturn, the form of Jupiter? Now you could see where all the astrology would come into this, which we believe in astrology, but not as anything physical. Well, yeah, this is paganism. This is paganism.
Mamish.
Origins mamish. This is the origins of a pagan world. Which is interesting. They started making forms. They started taking spiritual ideas. This is just appreciate this. They started taking spiritual ideas and putting them into physical form, and then telling you to bow down to them. And they were doing a lot of kiruv here, because it was kol ha'am ha'noshim v'haktanim v'shar am ha'aretz. They were doing outreach to every man, woman, and child. And each false prophet wanted you to go to their, temple, obviously.
Well,
Yes.
how do we know that some of the people that we consider that we just easily dismiss as false prophets aren't actual Mashiach? Like,
The Messiah has a big job description. He has a real clear job description.
absolutely, but like,
I think the best one is from the prophet Isaiah, that he will bring peace to the world.
absolutely.
So if anybody says, the Messiah, I am the Messiah, or the Messiah has arrived, I don't know about you, but look outside. There's not enough peace in the world to consider that the lion and the lamb are living in peace. Last time I looked, lions are still eating lambs. And even if you say that it's allegorical, that the lion and the lamb mean that nations will not eat each other, then we're in a world of so much war and destruction. So anybody who's claiming that the Messiah is here, he has not fulfilled his duties.
Well, what if we're the lamb and the nations are the lion?
then there's still a lot of
A lot
fighting.
of us are sleeping with the lions. It could be happening right now.
They're not lying. They're not in peace.
They're
Look around. The world is not such a
there are
friendly
communities
place.
that are just
Communities, but this is the whole world. Do you guys know Mashiach? It's going to be the whole world is going to have peace.
Weapons to plowshares.
Do you appreciate how beautiful that is? Yeah.
Would you say like one of the things that makes Judaism unique is that in what you said, that we bring spiritual ideas into this world, but we don't bow down. For example,
That's right.
It's just leather strands,
That's right.
but it's a spiritual idea.
It's a way of elevating the physical world, but never could you say that you bow down to your tefillin. Never you could say that God has now taken on a form, God forbid. Yeah, brother, remind me your name? Ben.
It's more for like, online, like a lot of some almost like idolizing this Torah.
You can never bow down to the Torah. You never pour wine, libations onto the Torah. You never offer a sacrifice. These are all things that are tied into idol worship. The only one that we give devotion to is God. And we'll see in a moment how the world spinning out of control comes back on course. Now look at this. And then the false prophet started telling people something. Surah Shaboda Meliboy. Look at this, so amazing. Where did they get that form from? Where did they get this form of Saturn from?
Hashem.
No, where did the false prophets get it from? Shaboda Meliboy. The Rambam says they fashioned it from their own heart. Which means there's a lot of room for creative interpretation on the part of the false prophets. Va'omer. And then they would say, Zuhi tsuras hakoichav haploini. This is the form of this star, this angel, this constellation. Shahoidiyu b'nevuosai. And they receive the form of this angel, this power, from their prophetic vision. And then they made the form that you should bow down to it. V'itchilu al derech zeh. They started in this way. Lasais tsuros beheichalos. Oh, this is getting bad. Then they started making forms in the temples, and then they made these forms tachas ha'ilonas. Then they started putting these little statues under trees, uberashe aharim, and on the tops of mountains. You go to mountaintops, sometimes you see structures up there. Be careful. Why would they always put it on a mountaintop?
Everyone can see them. It would be visible.
Statues on mountaintops. That also connotes power. Has to be at the highest place in the city. Valal Gvois. And down in the valleys also, that if you're caught in some valley and you feel a bit lost, don't worry. Saturn's got your back. And all Hashem Yerachim Chas v'Shalom. And then people would get together, and then they made groups of worship. They said, like, you want to get involved together? They started making groups of worship. The oimrim l'kol ha'am. And they started telling all the people, Shezu hatsura ha'meitiva u'meiria. And by the way, then they started using the scare tactics. By the way, this form will either give you good or bad. And therefore you better show up or else. They started telling people that this form will either give you good, those things that you're looking for, or the opposite. V'roi la'avda, and therefore it's appropriate to serve it. V'liyira mimenu, or to be afraid of it. Oh, maybe we have the power. And now he introduces another thing, Ve'hakomarim, and there were even priests that started to rise up. Oimrim lahem. It looks like there were these priests that were not like the regular false prophets. There were these priests that also started to get involved. Even if they weren't claiming, even if these priests weren't claiming that they were false prophets, they were claiming that they had an authority to then run this grouping of idol worship. So they started getting up ve'oim lahem sheba avodazu tarbu v'tatzlichu v'osu kach v'kach ve'al tasu kach v'kach. Now it's interesting. The priests then started to speak to them about, if you do this, you will be successful. And they started to create systems of how you would worship each one. That's already another level. They started creating delineation of how to worship. And you see there's a big institutionalization of the entire idol worshiping. Now, it's interesting. Then there's another type of people that started to rise up, and these people just seemed mixed up. You have the false. First, you had the generation of Enosh. What was their thought? A boy said, "Let's go." What was their thought? The generation of Enosh, right in the beginning. Give honor to the one that the king honors. I could hear that, but it was rooted in a mistake. What was their next? Then how did that go out of control from there? False prophets. And the false prophets started to say, I had a vision of what this looks like. And then they started to make actual statues and forms and images of those deities. And then you see there were the Komarim, these priests, that came along and said that you have to worship them like this and not like this and be afraid of them. There was already a system, it was systemization of it. And then you have the Koizvim, people that were just very mixed up, Lamoid Veloimar, and then from that, Shehakoichav Atzmoi, Oyagalgo Amalach, Daber Imam, Ve'omar Lahem, Avduni Bekach Vekach. Then the Koizvim at an even lower level. Not that the angel told, not the previous ones, God was telling them, it looks like this. These ones are the ones that are now saying, I spoke to the angel himself, and this is what he wants. This is what Saturn wants, my brothers. This is how you do. Make sure, like when you worship it, it has to be this much wine and not this much, and this type of oil, and of course don't use seed oils. That's pasha. Seed oils. Be careful, Rabbi Isai. Seed oils. We'll speak about that another time. But seed oils. If you know, you know. Leah knows. If you know, you know. And therefore, worship it like this and not like this. The poshat davar zeh b'chol ha'olam, and this started to spread everywhere. Because then all sorts of koizvim started to say, I spoke to this form, and he told me to do things like this. And now imagine every single town and village and city, and everyone has like their people rising up and they're saying, this is how you do it. And it would develop like a tradition in those places. And what would come out of that? Then, suras va'avoidus mishunas zu mizu lahakriv lahem lishtachavois. The Rambam says, because this started spinning so much out of control, people started having very strange customs. Because it wasn't under like one authority anymore, the false prophets. It wasn't even under the priests anymore. It became every little town and village, the local shaman would do whatever he felt and then create a whole approach based on his whatever he was into. And you can make anything up. And And because this became the occupation of the global family, people forgot God. Because they got so occupied with their local stuff. Midaitam v'lo yikiru v'nimtza kol am ha'aretz v'anashim v'aktanim einem yoidim ela hatzura shel eitz ve'even ve'ahechel shel binyan shenish chanchu mikat nusam. All that a kid knew growing up, nobody spoke about God anymore. What did the kid know? He grew up with that statue around. And if he grew up with that statue around, what do you think he told his kids? And if he grew up with that statue, what do you think he told his kids?
You're growing up with it.
You're going to grow up with it. And they were raised like this. The kids were raised with statues in their beds and statues over here. Because, like, if you don't, remember, we heard that you get zapped if you don't. The shtacha was lahem la'avdam u'lishava bishmam. Oh, the Rambam introduces something new. They started to swear oaths in the name of that statue. As someone to say, I swear in the name of v'chachamim shahayu bahem. And the people that were like the clergy amongst them, Kagoyin HaKomorim, like the priests, Kayotz Behem, Medam she'ein shama lokah, they even came to a point that there was no God. So not just like the regular local people, but even the clergy of their idol worship also said it's only a star. Yes, brother.
So I know this is going a bit ahead, but you're saying that this whole world is heavily inundated in false prophecy and idol worship.
Yes.
So how was people come up or not able to?
Oh, so says the Rambam, watch this.
Noah's right there.
Ela hakoycham ve'agalgalim shenasu atzur sa'ela beglalan v'ledemusan avar tzur ho'ilamim. But the rock of the world, the one who was the foundation of all reality, loy haya shamakiroi. Nobody knew of God. V'lo yoidiu el yechidim. There were individuals who knew of God still. Kagon Chanoch. Chanoch was around. Mesushelach. Methuselah.
It's in the parsha.
Noach knew. Shem ve'ever. There were individuals that knew of God. Val derech ze haya oilam, and in this way the world misgalgal would go the hoylech ad until somebody was born into the world. Ad shenolad amudai shela oilam, until the pillar of humanity stood up. Shehu, and he is Avram Avinu. Let's go. Till Avram Avinu stood up. This was all leading up to Abraham. 20 generations of the world spinning out of control. 20 generations. Says the Rambam, Kivan shenigmal esan zeh. And once this mighty one, we call Avram the mighty one, such a beautiful language. He started, shoitet bedaita means his mind started thinking. Yeah, brother.
If it wasn't for Abraham, do you think the world would have likely gone to another flag?
It says that if the world got to 2,000 years, it would have gone back to Toyu Vavoyu.